Historically, military responses to domestic protests have resulted in violations of Americans' civil rights, and even, in the case of the Kent State protests of the Vietnam War, tragic deaths. In short, I fervently believe the military should not be utilized in such scenarios other than as a last resort and only when all other assets have been expended.
Did you speak with President Trump at all as the attack was unfolding?
On January 6th?
Yes.
No, I did not. I didn't need to. I had all the authority I needed and knew what had to happen. I knew what had to happen.
Did you speak with Vice President Pence during the attack? Yes or no?
Yes.
But for President Trump's speech, do you think anyone would have marched on the Capitol and tried to overrun the Capitol without the president's remarks? I know you've answered this question several times, but I'd like you to answer it for the committee.
I think I'd like to modify my original assessment.
Why am I not surprised about that?
Based on, as Chief Contee said, we are getting more information by the day, by the minute about what happened. And to highlight some other observations that were made, it's clear now that there were although we're going to find out through the Department of Justice process and the legal system, it seems clear that there was some sort of conspiracy where there were organized assault elements that intended to assault the Capitol that day.
Mr. Rosen, prior to January 6th, were you asked or instructed by President Trump to take any action at the department to advance election fraud claims or to seek to overturn any part of the 2020 election results?
Well, Congressman, as just alluded to in your prior question, I can tell you what the actions of the department were.
No, sir.
Or not,
No,
what
sir.
the outcome was.
Mr.
I
Rosen.
cannot tell
Mr.
you,
Mr. Rosen.
consistent with my obligations today, about private conversations with the president one way or the other.
We had an unprecedented insurrection that led to 7 deaths, 5 here and 2 suicides, and you're saying this is a privileged communication?
I'm saying that my responsibility is to tell you about the role of the Department of Justice and
No,
the actions we
sir.
took.
Your responsibility is to be accountable to the American people and this Congress. I can't imagine a more critical question. Did you have conversations prior to January 6th with the President of the United States urging you to question or overturn or challenge the election results of 2020? It's a simple question. And by the way, no executive privilege has been invoked prior to this hearing and your testimony, and you've known you were coming here for over a month.
Congressman, respectfully, I understand your interest in the issue, and I've tried to be as forthcoming as I can with regard to the facts at the Department of Justice. When you ask me about communications with the president, I, as a lawyer, don't get to make the decision on whether I can reveal private conversations, and that other people make that decision. And I've been asked today to stick to within the ground rules that I have to abide by, so that's what I have to do. I'd be happy to check and get back to you.
That would be great, because I think the American people are entitled to an answer, Mr. Rosen, and I think you and I as public servants have an obligation. Did you meet with the President at the White House on January 3rd?
I did.
Was the 2016 election stolen?
I do not know of evidence that would say it was. I think you're alluding to a troublesome thing about the legitimacy of our past elections, sometimes governor's races being called into question. And I think it's really necessary and important for all of us to find ways to restore our citizens' faith in the electoral process and in our representative system of government.
The day of January 6th, there's reporting that you or others in your office tried to get to the president. That's been reported by journalists. I remind you, you're under oath. Did you or anyone in your office ever try to get a hold of President Trump on January 6th?
I did not. I had no idea about others in my office.
Did anyone in your office in the Department of Defense try to get a hold of the president?
Not that I'm aware of.
This hearing is called the Capitol Insurrection. Let's be honest with the American people. it was not an insurrection, and we cannot call it that and be truthful. The Cambridge English Dictionary defines an insurrection as, and I quote, an organized attempt by a group of people to defeat their government and take control of their country, usually by violence. And then from the Century Dictionary, the act of rising against civil authority or governmental restraint, specifically the armed resistance of a number of persons to the power of the state. As one of the members who stayed in the Capitol and on the House floor, who with other Republican colleagues helped barricade the door until almost 3 p.m. that day from the mob who tried to enter, I can tell you the House floor was never breached and it was not an insurrection. This is the truth. There was an undisciplined mob. There were some rioters and some who committed acts of vandalism. But let me be clear, there was no insurrection, and to call it an insurrection, in my opinion, is a bold-faced lie. Watching the TV footage of those who entered the Capitol and walked through Statuary Hall showed people in an orderly fashion staying between the stanchions and ropes, taking videos and pictures. You know, if you didn't know the TV footage was a video from January the 6th, you would actually think it was a normal tourist visit. There were no firearms confiscated from anyone who breached the Capitol. Also, the only shot fired on January the 6th was from a Capitol police officer who killed an unarmed protester, Ashley Babbitt, in what will probably be, eventually, be determined to be a needless display of lethal force. We heard earlier that her death certificate ruled her death to be a homicide. So based on the definition that I just outlined from 2 dictionaries, this question for former acting Attorney General Jeff Rosen: would you call the events of January 6th an insurrection or a riot with vandalism similar to what we saw last summer? Sir?
I think whatever you call them, they were a huge disappointment. And I think all of us wish they had not occurred. With regards to the specifics of some of the labels that we use, I need to be careful because they could have legal significance. And I've been asked, and I think it's my responsibility as well, not to do anything that might interfere with or in any way jeopardize the cases that are pending. So I want to stay away from the terminology, but I think the events of January 6th, we all have to agree, are things that should never have happened.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. You know, but the only insurrection that I have witnessed in my lifetime was the one conducted by members of the FBI with participants from the DOJ and other agencies under the banner Russia, Russia, Russia. High-ranking employees from these federal agencies and members of an independent council coordinated and fed a false narrative for over 2 years that the 2016 election was stolen and illegitimate.
A couple of questions, Mr. Miller. I know that you said earlier that you were in contact with, or you received a request from Mayor Bowser with respect to National Guard troop. When did you receive that request from Mayor Bowser?
December 31st, 2020. We spent the weekend going over it to finalize the plan with the D.C. National Guard and the Department of the Army and Army staff.
At what point did you and President Trump actually have a discussion on this request from Mayor Bowser?
I had a meeting with President Trump on the 3rd of January concerning some international threats. And at the very end, he asked if there were any requests for National Guard support, and I informed him of Mayor Bowser's request.
Mr. Miller, to clarify that point, did you tell the president about the mayor's request, or did President Trump ask if there were requests?
He asked if there were requests.
What was the president's response to you with regard to the request made by Mayor Bowser?
Fill it and do whatever was necessary to protect the demonstrators and that were executing their constitutionally protected rights.